by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I also extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. We acknowledge the stories, traditions and living cultures of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples on this land and commit to building a brighter future together. There are many distinguished people here today, ladies and gentlemen, including, of course, our guest of honour, Frank Pangallo, MBE. And whilst welcoming you all here, I will defer to Mayor Winchester for his specific welcomes. Christy McBain, MP, local member and Minister, of course, is unable to be with us today and she sends her apologies. And following the official naming, with speeches from Mayor Winchester and the State Member for Monero, Steve Wan, and our guest of honour, Frank, you are all invited to share in some light refreshments. I've known Frank Pangallo, MBE, I've known Frank for about 30 years. And my wife, Sue, and I, we first met Frank and Mary during the 1990s through the activities of the Rotary Club of Queanbeyan West. And in the early 2000s, I was a breakfast presenter on Queanbeyan Community Radio. And I used to interview Frank on Thursday mornings for about 20 minutes, around about that time. And it was a good opportunity for the Mayor to discuss issues impacting on the Queanbeyan community. I interviewed Steve as well, didn't I, at various times. And I remember talking about Frank coming in on the radio. I remember I could set my watch in terms of knowing that Frank would be entering the studio building precisely 27 minutes to 8, precisely. He was always punctual and he was full of energy and enthusiasm, and he still is. And those interviews, by the way, on the radio, they had their lighter moments. And I'm going to draw on one now, Frank. They had their lighter moments, and one memory that comes to mind, in Queanbeyan at the time, there was a vintage car rally coming to town. And Frank was extremely enthusiastic about vintage cars and talking all about them. And he asked me on air, could I remember the Ford prefects of the early 1950s? How many of you would remember the Ford prefects of the 1950s? Yes, the bulk of us. Well, Frank asked me that on air, and I tell you what, I took the opportunity to stir Frank a little bit. I said to him, Mayor, I'm not familiar with those cars, the Ford prefects. They would have been around way before my time. And do you remember that, Frank? I can't remember Frank's reply, but I can say to you, it certainly made for some very, very good radio. And by the way, incidentally, Frank Pangallo had been an advocate for a community radio station in Queanbeyan as far back as 1974. Now, before handing over to Mayor Winchester, I'd like to present for you just a snapshot about Frank Pangallo's public career that you may or may not recall. Frank was Queanbeyan City Council's longest serving mayor and the first elected mayor from a non-British background. He served on council from 1971 to 1983 and from 1989 to 2008. He was Deputy Mayor for 6 years, from 1974 to 1980, and he was the popularly elected Mayor at elections in 1991, 1995, 1999 and 2004. And a little snippet you may not be aware of, but during the council elections in 71, 74, 77 and 80, Frank Pangallo topped the polls in terms of the percentage of votes received by any candidate in those years, a long time ago now. After arriving in Australia from Italy at the age of 4, I won't tell you what year that was, but after arriving in Australia from Italy at the age of 4, Frank and his family started their life in Griffith in New South Wales, and that's where they overcame the language barrier and many prejudices faced by early post-war migrants. And Frank moved to Queanbeyan, and he first stood for election to the Queanbeyan Council in 1971. In 1973, Frank was a strong advocate for stricter controls on real estate dealings by council aldermen. In 1977, Frank Pangallo was appointed by the New South Wales Government to the first Ethnic Affairs Commission of New South Wales, and he served on the commission for 5 years. That same year, Frank steered the formation of the Queanbeyan Multicultural Centre. And again, that same year, 1977, Frank Pangallo was awarded an MBE. In 1996, Frank was nominated by the Local Government Association of New South Wales to join the Local Government Multicultural Committee. In 2000, during his term on council, Frank Pangallo was appointed by the State Minister as Director of the South East Waste Planning and Management Board. He was also a member of the South East Region's Recycling Group and a board member of Southern Tablelands Electricity. In February 2004, Frank was appointed as an administrator for the Greater Queanbeyan City Council, serving for 4 months. In 2007, Frank Pangallo was appointed by the New South Wales Governor as a member of the New South Wales Grants Commission for a 5-year term. Over the years, Frank also served as council representative on several key groups, including Australia for Reconciliation, the ACT's Eminent Persons Group, the Canberra Business Council, and Queanbeyan's Business Promotions Committee. And if I could just cite just a few of the many community achievements during Frank's 17 years as mayor, we can think of Queanbeyan's Waste Minimisation Centre being established, recycling bins being provided to Queanbeyan households, and council acquired railway land for community use as parks. And Frank was a very strong and early advocate for tree preservation orders. The Queanbeyan Aquatic Centre was upgraded with the addition of an indoor heated pool, and the Q, Queanbeyan's Performing Arts Centre, was planned and constructed and opened by the then Governor-General Michael Jeffrey, AC, CVO, MC, in March 2008. And from a governance point of view, during Frank's 17 years as mayor, council never increased the rates by more than the rate pegging amount set by the New South Wales Government. At the time of Frank's departure from the Queanbeyan City Council in 2008, council had over $75 million in investments. That's 17 years ago. And they had $75 million in investments and a minuscule, small internal loan of just $5,000. Right? You can add the two figures, you can come up with the net result. Governance for Frank, in my mind, was marked by the delivery of a wide array of community achievements. Sound judgment, responsible, open and transparent financial oversight, and he did that all with fairness, honesty and integrity. Throughout his career, ladies and gentlemen, Frank Pangallo has made a lasting and significant contribution to the region. From the establishment of the Queanbeyan Multicultural Centre in 1977 to overseeing the planning, construction and opening of the Q in the 2000s, Frank's leadership and vision were instrumental to shaping the Queanbeyan community. Frank, looking at you now, and I know what this building was like 20 years ago, you would have spent many hours in these old council chambers, and so it's very fitting that this building be named after you, now that it is a space for our local history collection and a place to study. On a personal note, I thank you and Mary for being such a significant part of our lives. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I invite Mayor Kenrick Winchester to speak with you. Ladies and gentlemen, the Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you for clapping. I was going to start by saying a big thank you to Brian. So not many people will be aware, we only asked Brian to MC this event about 2 days ago. So he's put all of that together since Tuesday or Wednesday. And before I forget, a big thank you to all the council staff involved in bringing this day together. That we often overlook them, so I want to thank the staff for everything they've done in pulling today together. I think we did plan for 40 people. Then we realised Frank had invited about another 50 other people that we weren't aware of. And now we have standing room only, which he very much deserves. So I want to start by recognising some of the VIPs that we have in the room, starting with the man we are honouring today, of course, Mr Frank Pangallo MBE. We also have current and former member for Monero, Steve Wan. We have QPRC Councillor Steve Taskowski, Councillor Bryce Wilson, Councillor Katrina Willis. We have former Queanbeyan City Councillors Alan McGrath. There's Alan. So Alan was on council for a very long time and also is currently serving over at Yass and was their mayor for a little bit. So he's addicted to local government. We've got former councillor Tom Marvick, Anne Rocker, Phil Hawke is here, Dennis Reid is here. If there's any other former councillors or aldermen that I've missed. Tom Baker, apologies. Chris O'Rourke. There you go. I did pretty good. Also, we have QPRC General Manager Rebecca Ryan here, and I think former Queanbeyan City Council General Manager Hugh Percy. There he is, up with Alan at the back. Val and Wendy Smith, who are here, who are wife and daughter respectively of the former long-serving Town Clerk R.B. Smith. They're here, I believe, as well. So, before I get too far into my speech, I'd just like to say what an honour it is to be here today amongst so many that have contributed so much to the city of Queanbeyan. And it's nice that we have this opportunity to say some very nice words about Mayor Pangallo while he's very much still alive and kicking. Too often it is speeches and words like we hear today that are delivered when it's too late. Now, moving right along from those sombre comments, I'd like to invite everyone in attendance here today to take a moment, think back a few years, perhaps a few decades, back to their teenage years. No doubt some will need to remember back a tad further than others. But if you think back to your teenage years when life was hopefully for you stress-free, the world was your oyster, you all had so many hopes and dreams for the future. Hopefully for most of you, these were considered glory days. Personally for me, my teenage years were during the 1990s. Some here might have some different thoughts on the 1990s, and there certainly were a lot of good and bad moments. Some examples being the end of apartheid, Paul Keating and John Howard, something called the internet, Bill Clinton and and Hillary, the Y2K bug, the build up to the Sydney Olympics, etc., etc. But for me, as I think back about my teenage years in Queanbeyan, there are two things that I clearly remember with great fondness. Two things that I didn't really think about at the time, things that just kind of were. The first and most obvious is the mighty Canberra Raiders being perennial grand finalists and premiers. But the second, which is a little bit harder to describe, is the sense of community, the sense of pride that I and many others of my generation felt in our hometown, in our school and in our community, a generation that are proud to be born and bred in Queanbeyan. Queanbeyan has been an amazing place for me to grow up and call home. And as I've gotten older, and I like to think wiser, I've come to understand that it's people like former Mayor Frank Pangallo that have played a substantial role in not just contributing to, but creating the Queanbeyan that I know and love. For my generation, Frank was not only mayor, he was the mayor. He was our mayor, a pillar of the community, and a pseudo-celebrity as well. When I think back and recall people who have really helped shape our town and community, very few would stand out as much as Frank Pangallo. Frank is synonymous with the city of Queanbeyan and its progress. 31 years he served on Queanbeyan Council, including a record 17 as our mayor. He moved to Queanbeyan and first stood for election to Queanbeyan Council in 1971 and retired in 2008. He served as an alderman or councillor from 1971 to 1983 and again between 89 and 91. And he served as Mayor of Queanbeyan City Council between 1991 and 2008. Significantly for his multicultural community, he was the first elected Mayor from a non-British background and remains the only Mayor of Queanbeyan from a non-Anglo background. He supported the retention of Queanbeyan's built heritage and introduced the first heritage conservation areas in Queanbeyan. He successfully introduced procedures for councils to declare their real estate and other pecuniary interests many years before it was required by law. He ensured planning matters were considered in open council and not behind closed doors, as had previously occurred. He encouraged business and city beautification. He was a driving force behind the establishment of the Q Theatre. He oversaw the development of Queanbeyan's indoor pool. When he left QCC, as we heard from Brian, he ensured that council's debt was virtually zero. No comment from me on the current state of that. He helped promote and raise the profile and image of Queanbeyan, and he truly was a pillar of our town and community, and he remains to this day. Personally, for me, Frank Pangallo has been a mentor, a friend, a sometimes confidant, who has helped me enormously with the transition from councillor to mayor. His advice has proven invaluable, and I will no doubt continue to be reliant on his guidance going forward. The honouring of Frank Pangallo is well overdue. It is nearly 20 years since he completed his last term as mayor. An event like this and naming something after this great man should have happened many years ago, but here we are, and I'm proud to be the mayor that is finally getting this done for you, Frank. When I think back to those halcyon days of the 1990s, I distinctly remember Frank making many speeches up at Queanbeyan High School and attending our presentation days, and I even recall him presenting me with an award in 1998, probably for being the biggest ratbag at the school.
Nothing's changed.
But it is honestly very surreal to think back on those days and to be standing here today making a speech as Mayor in honour of Frank Pangallo. So Frank, Mr Mayor as I call him, I'd like to personally thank you for the many years of service, for your time, effort and dedication toward making the community that I've grown up in, that I proudly call home, that I myself am now very proud to be Mayor of, the special place that it is. I'd like to offer congratulations to you on being recognised today for your service to our community. You're a special person, and on behalf of not only my generation of Queanbeyan locals, but indeed on behalf of the entire Queanbeyan community, I say thank you. Given the service, I'm nearly finished, so we'll clap at the end, all right? Hopefully. Given the service performed by Mayor Frank Pangallo for the Queanbeyan community and the 20 years plus he spent in this very room, the former council chambers, it is only fitting for this building to be named in his honour. Congratulations, Frank.
Member for Monero, Steve Wong.
Well, thanks, Brian, and it is really wonderful to be here. Can I start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land we're on, the Ngambri people, elders past and present, and acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are here with us today. I'm really here to acknowledge someone who really is a traditional owner of this room we're in, and that is Frank. He spent so many years here, and as both our previous speakers have said, a huge and impressive record there. I also want to acknowledge Mary and family for their incredible role in all the things that Frank has done, and I'm sure that we're missing Tony again today, and wish that he was able to see this great achievement, his dad acknowledged like this. You've heard a lot about Frank, so I'm going to try not to go over it again, but I was just delighted that this appeared in my diary to be able to come here today. I wouldn't have missed it for the world to acknowledge Frank's service. I'm a bit older than our current mayor, Frank has a history here, and it's going to make him seem quite old, because when Frank was elected in 1971 to council for the first time, he was serving as mayor with a local federal member called Alan Fraser. The next local federal member that he served with was a relatively young politician for those days called Bob Wan, my late father. And I was just a kid, but I remember Frank and those days of Dad being the member here in Queanbeyan, and the work that was being done by the local council, and some of the amazing stories that I heard from my father, and I've later heard from Frank and people like Tom Marvick, who's here with us, about those times of in Queanbeyan with the Leagues Club in its prime, and visits from various federal politicians across the border, and the sort of dinners that were had and the rallies that were had around the times of 1972 to 1975. There was a lot going on in Queanbeyan, and a very exciting time that Frank was a part of, and the sort of work that he was doing at the time. It is an incredible career when you note that Frank was awarded an MBE in the 70s for what at the time would have been considered to be outstanding service to the people of Queanbeyan, and that he went on and did that for so many decades more. It just is a testament to the sort of time and effort that Frank put in, and the commitment that he's made over his lifetime to this community. It's something that I don't think anybody will match. Really, it's a phenomenal record that you couldn't hope to match. Well, you might hope to, but you probably wouldn't live long enough. But it is incredible. Frank's leadership, as we've heard, has been resulted in some amazing things around Queanbeyan. I mean, we haven't mentioned the Marco Polo Club, which existed as a really important institution in our town for decades, and Frank was involved in the establishment of the Marco Polo Club. And I know was very sad about what became of it in the long term, but that was a really important part of our city for a very long time, and he made an incredible contribution to that. We've heard about some of the facilities, the queue next door. I know there's many other former councillors who are involved in that as well, but it's a magnificent achievement to see that there. My particular favourite, of course, is the swimming pool. For any of you who are there, I'm there many mornings. Frank and I did have a little dispute over it, because Frank's a non-swimmer and he should have put 2 more lanes in it, but but he didn't understand. But it wasn't, you didn't see that. Talk to the mayor. But that was an incredible thing that I was pleased to be involved in as well when I was in my first term as local member. But there is so much that Frank has done around our community. And I want to say today, and pass on as well, Christy McBain's regards in this. Christy and I Christy and I and the Mayor actually, we work very closely together, and we talk a lot about different things. And I know that she is really disappointed that she's not able to be with us here today, Frank, to join in acknowledging you with this building naming. And she actually specifically asked for one of us to convey her congratulations and how much she... I think the great delight she takes in seeing this building named after you, Frank. So I pass on Christy's regards in that as well. But from my point of view, it's quite emotional, really. I'm quite delighted to be here. As Kenrick said, Frank's been around for a long time. He's always encouraged people who he thought should play a bigger role in this community. He certainly encouraged me from the moment I came across to Queanbeyan. In I don't know, 1997 or thereabouts. And he certainly encouraged me along the way. He and Jim Snow were people who did that at the time. We, I think, owe a great debt of gratitude to Frank's commitment that he's had to Queanbeyan, not just in the buildings that have been built and the service that he gave to council, but in that role that he's had in encouraging other people to stand up and be a part and be a positive role in communities. And that's something that should never be underestimated as a role for leaders in our community to do that sort of thing. So I'm going to, stop there, but just congratulations. It's a great honour for me to be a part, to be a local member, to be here today, to see this building named after Frank Pangallo. It's very well deserved. I thank the council, mayor and all the councillors who made the decision for this to happen. I think it's wonderful to see the people who have contributed to our community acknowledged in this way. And again, as I said, Frank, it's you're a traditional owner of this building, and now it's there forever to see it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the man you've been waiting to hear from, Frank Pangallo.
If I don't get to see you when this is over, Alan, I've got something for you to take home. Firstly, I'd like to thank the three previous speakers, the state member, the mayor and Brian. What you've managed to do, Brian, you in particular, was to destroy what I was going to say. I had anticipated that I would speak for probably 3 hours, so I'll now have to cut it down to about 15 minutes. So you've covered a lot of the area that I was going to talk about, and thank you very much for that. I do appreciate it. I'd like to start off by thanking everyone that's here today, but in particular, all those people that have come from the coast, down the Ulladulla, and all my relatives that have come from Sydney. It's great to see you here to celebrate this great occasion. I'd also like to thank the Mayor in particular for what he's done, and the staff for what they've done, the General Manager, or CEO as you now call her, for being here, and other staff that are here. So it's great to see so many here to celebrate this day with me. Now I've had to change what I was going to say, but let me say that my journey started around about now, 54 years ago, and that makes me feel very old. I was born in 1943, in case anyone wants to do any Googling or anything. So this October I'll be 82. What made me run for local government was I had a dear friend who's no longer with us, a chap called David Lowry. Now some of you people will know David Lowry. David Lowry was a pharmacist in the Queanbeyan building in Morisset Street, and I used to drop in from time to time and have a bit of a chat about council and things in general. And when I was there in July in 1971, and I don't know the precise date, but I know it was July in 71, he said to me, and this I'll quote exactly what he said. He said, well, he asked me actually, he said, why don't I throw my hat in the ring for the council election on September the 18th? And I was very naive. I didn't know what throwing your hat anywhere meant. I didn't wear a hat, so I asked him to. I did a Pauline Hanson and asked him, could he please explain? And he did. he said, I think you should run for council. He said, you've got a lot of fire in you. He said, I think if you get elected, you'll make a good councillor. So that's where it all began. So I put together that yellow leaflet with David's help, and he cut and added things to it, but largely it was what I wanted to do. He said to me, when I finished that, he said, if you get elected, and I know you will, this is what he said, what are you hoping to achieve? And I thought for a moment, and as I said, I was very naive about politics and how council operated. I'd never been to a council meeting. In fact, very few people did I know that were on council. And I thought for a couple of seconds, and I said, if I do get elected, I'd like to leave the place better than where I find it. He said, that's a good idea. He said, if you've got that attitude, he said, you'll go a long way. Anyway, I went on and ran my campaign, manned all the booths on election day, and at the end of the day, 6 o'clock, I was so exhausted, I went home, had tea, and Sunday morning he came around and said, have you got your scrutineers lined up? I said, what are they? I said, what do the scrutineers do? He said, well, we've got to have someone down there for the count. He said, look, sign this here and I'll go down and be your scrutineer. So I signed a form that he had already, and it must have been about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday, he came back up to my place. We were living in Tharra Road at the time. He was so excited, and I thought, oh, gee, this bloke must have won the lottery. And he said, you've topped the poll, you've topped the poll. And I said, I'm sorry, I said, I'm not following you. What does that actually mean? And I'm not making this up. I mean, that's how much, because this is all relevant to what I'm going to say about the way I did my job or tried to do my job. I was not aware what topping the poll meant. And he pulled out a little bit of, I'll just get it and show it to you. This is a copy of the actual thing. It was handwritten, and him being a pharmacist, you can never read their writing. But he said, look, you beat Fred Land. He said, Fred Land's got 362 votes, and you've got 487. I said, oh, well, that's great. I said, so does that mean I might get elected? He said, you're in, mate. He said, you're in. There's no maybe. So that was really interesting. So, as I say, basically the rest of it's history. But once I got into council, or got on council, got notice for the first meeting. Before that, we had the declaration of the poll. There's a couple of photos down here on my right. Have a look at them. I'm there with Mary. She's kissing me on the back of the head. And she's holding a little child. That little child is over here now. She's grown up a bit since then. So that was the beginning. Anyway, we had our first council meeting, and instead of sort of being welcomed with open arms or anything, I got this tremendous resistance. None of the old guard, as I'll call them, without naming anyone, would talk to me before or after meetings. The only time they mentioned my name was when they were attacking me during a debate, when I was trying to have voluntary real estate registers and declaration of interests and all those sorts of things. And, the sky was going to fall in if I got my way and all those sorts of things. And all this occurred in the 70s, 71 beyond, right up until about 77. There was this animosity towards me, as if somehow, as some other politician has said in recent times, I'd stolen the election. I mean, I put myself forward, and I was elected by the people, and I would have thought that would have been enough recognition to be at least accepted as a member of the council. But anyway, I wasn't deterred by that. Incidentally, some of the old guard were taking bets amongst themselves would I last 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? Anyway, at the end of that 1971 period, I seriously thought that I would not run again. It was just getting a bit too much for me. By that stage, I was 31 years old. I thought there must be better things in life to do than being attacked every time we had a meeting. But I decided against my better judgment to run again. And I'll never forget the 1974 election, not because I topped the poll again, that was neither here or there, but on the day I was handing out how to vote cards up here at Isabella Street School. And it was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. This chap that I didn't know then, and I wish I knew him now, walked up to me, extended his hand. He said, "Congratulations." He said, "You've done a great job during the last term, and I wish you all the best for the future." He said, "By the way, you're the first WOG I've ever voted for." So of course I thanked him very much and said if I could do anything to help him, I would be pleased to do it. So that was, and it's interesting how you remember things like that. You know, I mean, apart from a couple of people that turned up in taxis and they raced towards the, to go and vote, and I'd hand them a how to vote card, and one bloke said, "Is this compulsory? Is this voting compulsory?" I said, No, it's not." "Oh," I said, "Stuff it, I'm not going to vote." He jumped back in his taxi and went back home. So that was that. Yeah, it was all very, very interesting. But some of the things I wanted to briefly touch on. In 1992, the council was negotiating with Yarralumba Shire to extend the city boundaries because we wanted to provide for future expansion. Anyway, we had several meetings. Hugh, that's at the back, he was in these. It was the general manager, myself. Sometimes we had the engineer. So we're having this discussion on one particular time, and the engineer for Yarralumba Shire said we were trying to get some area that was a little bit hilly, and he said, "Oh, look," he said, "yeah," he said, "it's no good talking about that." He said, "You can't get water up there." He said, "It's too high." I said, "Bill," I said, "we've got areas in town that not only do we get water there, but I said, we can actually push shit uphill." So I said, "Surely if we can do that there, we can get water to this new area." Anyway, we reached an agreement and we got 16.8 square kilometres, which gave us enough land to expand to 55,000. So that was interesting, because I was never backwards in saying what I felt. Sometimes it got me into trouble, but be that as it might, that's the way it was. Now, in 1977, we saw the first Australian Capital Region State of the Environment report. Now, some of you may not know what I'm talking about. This is a report that councils are required to prepare each year. Now, at the time, I was a member of the Regional Leaders Forum, which took in the ACT and all surrounding councils. And Kate Carnell was the Chief Minister at the time. And I must say that I've always been a Labor supporter and at one time even been a Labor member. I admired what she did. She was a very, very good Chief Minister in the ACT. And I said to her at one of those leaders' forums, "Kate, the ACT has to do a State of the Environment report. We have to do one." I said, "Why don't we do a regional one?" So in 1997, we produced the first regional State of the Environment report. That was something that I was really happy about. Between 1995 and 1999, Council expended in excess of $12 million on capital works and other things that we've done. In 2005, we saw the completion of the Keir Theatre at a cost of over $8 million, without the need to borrow any money. We had either money in reserves, money that was contributed by state and federal governments, or Section 94 contributions that we got from developers, and we had enough money to do it, and we did it. And the queue would have never happened, let me tell you that, unless there were, and I must pay acknowledge the contribution that former councillor Rocker did. She said to me one day, "Oh, we need to have this theatre," and again, I was quite naive on that sort of stuff, and I said, "Please explain a little bit about it." And once she convinced me, we started the process. This was after the 95 election, and in 2005 we saw the completion of it with no debt, and that is significant. The thing that I regret to this day is that there's never been an acknowledgement of the contribution that the Commonwealth made. I think it was about $500,000, and the state government, I think, contributed over $1 million. And in fact, one of the last things I did before I retired in 2008, I put up a mayoral minute recommending that a suitable plaque be put in the foyer next to the one that is there for the official opening on the 1st of May, or March or whatever it was. I said that there should be a plaque there to recognise the contributions made by state and federal governments, the steering committee and the Queanbeyan players. The Queanbeyan players was a small group of people, but nevertheless they set about raising funds, and I think they raised over $50,000, which that contribution, it was a decision of the council that had happened, that the plaque be put in, but it nothing ever happened. Maybe Mr Mayor, you might
I'll put that up next meeting.
resurrect it. I'll give you the mayoral minute to see what we've done. Now, during my term on council from 71 to 83, and then from 89 to 2008, as an alderman, councillor and mayor, there were many other significant things that we did. For example, the late Norm McGuinness, and I hope Alan's here. Yes, Alan's here. Norm and I got on very well. And I used to, in fact, give him a lift home. He used to live in McCoy Street after the council meetings. And this particular night I remember very well, Bob Smith, Wendy's father, who was the town clerk, put up a report that we needed to demolish an old historic home there because it was in the flood way of the Queanbeyan River. Anyway, Norm McGuinness and I voted against it. We were very upset that we'd be destroying this, solid home just for the sake that it might get flooded every now and then. And when I took him home, we drove past, and I said to Norm, I said, why don't we put in a notice of rescission? A notice of rescission is when you overturn a previous decision. So we got onto the town clerk the next morning. We got, I think you needed 3 signatures, we got a 3rd signature, and we debated it again, and we were able to get the majority to support it. Now, as a result of that then became the Queanbeyan Art Society Art Gallery, and is still existing there today. So that was very good. And I'm nearly done, it'll only take another hour. The issue of green bins, we issued those. We acquired some land at the railway goods yard, which was in Henderson Road. And I remember Hugh telling me that that was a proposal. So I asked him whether he could arrange to have a meeting with the manager. And we did. The manager of State Rail for that section came down and saw us one weekend, and we picked him up and we drove him around and drove him up there and told him why it should not be redeveloped as a as a goods yard again, because that's what it was. It was a goods yard for the rail. And we were able to convince him eventually, through Hugh's arm twisting, he was better at it than I was, that they actually donate that land to us. I'm not sure whether we paid any money or not, but I don't think we did. And now we've got an open area there in that part of town which didn't exist before then. And then, of course, the residents in that area were agitating for community centres and toilets and all the rest of it. So I said to Hugh one time, I said, maybe we should look at seeing if we can get a railway carriage and put there. So he said, oh, that's a good idea. So Alan Moss and Alan Moss used to be the manager of Parks and Recreation, we got authorisation from the council. We jumped on a plane, went to Melbourne, went to the goods yard where they had all these trains all lined up that were destined to be sold. We picked the one we wanted, and Alan arranged the transportation, and it's still sitting up there. We gutted all the seats out of it, and it's like a community centre. It's used quite often. So that was another great thing that I think we achieved. Others have mentioned about the establishment of the multilingual centre. The waste minimisation centre in Lawn Road. Again, there was some land, there was a surplus there at the time, and we were looking for an area to create this area where people could dump their rubbish and it could be recycled and put back into compost and all the rest of it. So that occurred. Although that was quite controversial at the time. I remember there was one particular councillor, and I won't mention her name, that actually seconded the motion to go ahead with this. And then when we went out to consultation, there was a bit of resistance from the public. Oh, I was going to get all this smell, we're going to do this and do that. And she sort of jumped on the other side of the ship and tried to say that she never supported it. So I pulled out the minutes, of course, which I always carried in my back pocket. And we got that through, and it's been there for a long time. And, we take it for granted. You do any lawn clippings or branches or anything, you take them up there and you get rid of them. We also upgraded the 50-metre pool at around about that time. Cost in 2001, in fact, it cost $1.3 million. And we saw the completion of the heated pool. There again, that was another one. Council had been discussing for years about, should we have heated pool? Do we enclose the existing one? Do we do this? And so this went on for probably, 10 or 15 years. And then finally, we went to council and, I had all these consultations with Hugh. I've got to say that I wouldn't have been able to achieve or be credited with any of this if I didn't have someone like Hugh Percy, the general manager at the time, that didn't fully support me. Because without that support, nothing would have happened. And to this day, I'm indebted. I don't see this as my achievement, it's our achievement, because he used to bounce things off me and I would off him. And so and then of course if there was some legal implication, we always had Michael Murphy. Michael Murphy here in the front. And if there was a difficulty, and I'm being serious about this, there might have been some local government reason why we couldn't do things. Michael was always on hand. He had an office next door to the general manager, and I used to wear the carpet out from my office there, going backwards and forwards. And I've got to say this not because he's here. Michael's never given me a bum steer. His advice has always been sound. So in 2004, we officially opened the heated pool. But I've got to tell you one thing. The plaque that's there, that's got my name on it, wasn't really the plaque that was going to go there. Because in June of that year, as the administrator, Alan Moss prepared the bronze plaque. and it said this field is opened by the administrator, but as we got a couple of weeks before it, it wasn't finished, so there was no point in opening something that wasn't finished. So I've got that plaque at home, which he was going to throw it away. I said, no, I'll souvenir that just to remind me. And so we actually opened it, whatever the date says, I can't remember now. The other thing I'm very proud of is that I established a fundraising trust to support 3 children, and I won't mention any names here, that were orphaned following the loss of both parents. And I wanted to get behind that. I did a public launch on that and did some fundraising. I remember one time I sent an email to Alan Jones, not Alan Jones, I'll wash my mouth out. John Laws, yeah, no. So I got in touch with John Laws and told him what the story was, and he pushed it on his program, which was very popular in those days, and we raised over $62,000. Now, that money was used and raised to help the orphan children, and I haven't seen them since they've grown up, and one day I'd like to see them, because I did it with great passion, and I'm pretty sure that it assisted their upbringing under difficult circumstances. The other thing that Hugh and I had, we didn't wheel and deal in properties. I mean, staff couldn't do it anyway, and as a councillor I would never involve in using information, buying properties, making money and all the rest of it with the knowledge I had. But we both were on the same page again. We wanted to buy properties for the future needs of the city. And the rugby union club across the road, unfortunately for them, went belly up, and it went on the market, and Hugh said, well, why don't we buy it? Took that to council. We never ever did anything without council's authority. And of course, we bought that. I think it was $490,000. And then there was another time where I was just driving around one day looking for things to do, as I did. And I noticed there was a sign on the Morisset Street nursery that it was for sale. And I thought, gee, that might be a good future parking area. So I knocked up a Merrill Minute with Hugh's assistance, took it to council, and they approved that we buy it. And then when we started the negotiations, they had other adjoining land, probably another acre or two. So we ended up buying the whole lot for $1.16 million, because I thought that Queanbeyan was growing at such a rate that we would need parking sooner or later. And that's one of the strengths that Queanbeyan's always had. And for those councillors and staff, I wasn't going to give you any advice, but on that one, don't ever introduce paid parking in Queanbeyan. That is an advantage that this city has over Canberra, and it's one that we should always try and keep. And then, of course, as banks started to do in those days, Westpac decided they were going to sell their property. So I said to Hugh, well, we might as well buy that as well. It adjoined the rugby union club, and we still have the ratepayers' bank card in our pocket. So we got approval for that, and away we went, and we bought that. And I think it's been a very good move, because Queanbeyan will expand and will need more parking and more properties to do something with. But just in case you think council was dull and boring, there's a couple of things I'd like to tell you about. I remember one particular meeting we were dealing with, it was in the days when Bob Smith was the town clerk. I think he put up and by the way, let me say now that Bob Smith, who was the town clerk for I think 38 years, was one of the greatest gentlemen I've ever had the experience to meet. He was a fantastic chap. Anyway, he put up this report about, I think it was him or it might have been one of the health and building surveyors, but it was under his name, that someone had put up an illegal building. Not a building, they renovated this place, and it was deemed to be a building that was illegally erected. So the report came along and we started debating it, and there was one particular councillor, alderman, sorry, she was then, and I won't mention her name, but I think you might work out who she was. She said, well, Mr Mayor, I can't see that I can support this, not taking action against this person. There is no way that we can condone an illegal erection. and with that I interjected and said, how can you tell when it's an illegal one? Well, I'm sure that night she must have wet herself because she couldn't compose herself and stop laughing. So there was quite a few funny things like that happened. But by and large, some of the meetings we had, our meetings weren't all here. This only occurred in the 90s, I think it was, or late 80s. Because when I got elected, we were in the tourist information place, which is a very small pokey hole, and all the staff was there, and then of course we got the brand new building, not the one that's there now, that cost a little bit more than what the other one. The one that went up in I think about 1973. In fact, in my other life, I was an electrician. I worked on that and did all the electrical installation over quite a few years. And that building was put up, it was quite modern for its time, but it had provision to go up, I think, 5 or 6 stories. And I thought that was good. And I was sad to see the council make the decision that it did to demolish it and spend a lot of money. I know it wasn't your problem, Mr Mayor. And if I can tell you one thing for certain, without being critical, had I been still on council, I wouldn't have went for the new building, because I think the one that was there could have been retrofitted and maybe a section across the road at the Rugby Union Club. But anyway, be that as it may, I think one of the proudest things that I got out of my time on council was that when I left in 2008, the council was debt-free. It had, I think, about $5 million, not 5,000, in debt, which was what we call an internal loan. It was like borrowing from your wife, and it wasn't quite like that, but we borrowed from one fund to another fund. And we had about $75 million in reserve. Now, that, I've got to tell you this, and I'll finish up on this note, wouldn't have happened if it hadn't have been for, I'm not 100% sure, and if few nods on this, and then I'll know I'm right. I think it was in 1988, the previous mayor before me put up a report with the general manager that the council should stop borrowing money. And if they did that, if the council went along with that, because each year the council in those days would borrow $500,000 or $1 million to do all these works that had to be done. But by not borrowing any more money, by 2004, it would become debt-free. Now, does anyone ever remember the day when they paid out their mortgage, what the feeling was like? Well, it's a great feeling. And so, and not only were we going to be debt-free, but that freed up, if I remember correctly, about $3 million a year of funds that we didn't have to pay on the loans. And we could spend that on our community. And I think if anything that really makes me proud is that situation. Now, whether I've done the right thing or not over the years, I'm proud of what I've done. Would I do it differently? No, I don't think I would. Have I got any regrets? Yes, I have. I regret that I wasn't born in 1953 instead of 1943. And with that, thank you very much.
Well, what can one say? Frank Pangallo? Yes. And for the naming of the Frank Pangallo Heritage Library. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, Frank Pangallo. I think at this stage, all I need to do is to say thank you very, very much, especially for Mayor Winchester, and also our state member, Steve Wan, and also to all of you for coming along. Lovely to see so many people. And you are invited for some light refreshments in the entrance to the Bicentennial Centre, in the next few minutes. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.